My name is Margaret, though these days most just call me Grandma Maggie. But before I was a grandmother, before the gray hair and the lines on my face, I was just a girl. A girl who dreamed, laughed, and lived in a world that feels so far away now. I was born in a small American town in the late 1940s. Back then, the world felt bigger and smaller at the same time. Bigger because none of us had seen much beyond the county lines, and smaller because everybody knew your name. You couldn't walk down Main Street without being greeted by three people, each asking about your mother or offering you a piece of gossip you already knew. We lived in a modest house on the corner, painted white though the paint peeled every few years. My father was a factory man, his hands stained with grease and his back bent from long shifts. My mother was a homemaker in the truest sense, always busy, always moving, never once sitting down until every chore was done. I can still see her apron dusted with flour, her hair pinned up neatly, her eyes both tired and kind. I was the middle child. My older sister, Evelyn, was the beauty of the family. She had perfect hair, perfect posture, and a way of making people stop and look when she entered a room. My younger brother, Tom, was the wild one, climbing fences, sneaking into neighbors' orchards, always finding trouble. And then there was me. I was neither the beauty nor the troublemaker. I was the one who lingered in between, stubborn, curious, and always hungry for something more. School was the center of our little world. I liked the lessons, sure, but what I loved most were the people. The girls whispering secrets in hallways, the boys throwing footballs in the yard, the teachers who tried their best to tame us but often failed. I wasn't the prettiest girl in class, but I had a laugh that, as my friend said, could fill a room. That laugh became my strength. Saturdays were magic. Roller skates clattering on sidewalks, jukeboxes playing Elvis or the Supremes at the diner, and milkshakes shared with friends who swore we'd always be together. Sundays were quieter. Church in the morning, where hymns filled the room with voices louder than the old piano, and then afternoons spent with family, eating roast chicken and mashed potatoes. Life wasn't perfect, money was tight, hand-me-down clothes were the norm, and sometimes tempers flared in our house. But when I look back, I see it all bathed in a golden light. Those years gave me roots, and I didn't know then just how deeply they'd shape the woman I became. They say you never forget your first love. And they're right, not because it always lasts, but because it changes you. It teaches you what your heart is capable of. I was 16 when I met Henry. He wasn't the most handsome boy in town, but his eyes had a spark, as though he was always halfway to laughing. He worked part-time at the diner, wearing that silly paper hat, pouring coffee for tired farmers and gossiping ladies. My friends teased me for staring too long at him, but I couldn't help it. My heart fluttered every time he leaned over the counter and grinned at me. Our first date was nothing grand. We walked down Main Street, our steps awkwardly in rhythm, and shared a milkshake at the drugstore fountain. He held my hand for the first time that day, clumsy and unsure, his palms sweaty, but to me it felt like lightning had struck. I remember thinking, so this is what it feels like to be seen. We spent a summer wrapped in each other's world. We went to the county fair, riding the Ferris wheel until my stomach turned, laughing so hard I nearly cried. He gave me a cheap ring from a carnival stand, promising it was a sign of forever. I wore it proudly, even though the silver turned my finger green. But as quickly as it began, It ended. Henry left for college, and I stayed. At first, there were letters, long, detailed, filled with promises. But then the letters got shorter, then fewer, and eventually they stopped altogether. Did it hurt? Of course. I cried into my pillow at night, wondering what I had done wrong. But with time, I realized it wasn't about me. We were young, life was pulling us in different directions. And though it ended, I never forgot what Henry gave me. Proof that I could be loved, that I was worth choosing, even if only for a season. That lesson carried me through the rest of my life. Not all of us get to chase dreams. Some of us have to work. And while I once thought that was unfair, I later realized it was a gift. After high school, college wasn't an option. Not many girls from our town went, and even if they had, we couldn't afford it. So I found work. My first job was at the sewing factory on the edge of town. Rows of women bent over machines, the hum of needles filling the air like bees in a hive. The work was hard. The pay was small, but it was honest. The factory was hot in the summer, cold in the winter. My fingers bled more times than I can count from pin pricks and blisters. But I learned discipline there. I learned pride in small things, in straight seams, in neat stacks of finished garments, in the weight of my paycheck at the end of the week. I'll never forget the first time I handed my mother that envelope of bills. She looked at me, her eyes tired, her hands still red from scrubbing floors, and she smiled. "Thank you, Maggie," she whispered. And in that moment, I felt taller than I ever had. I was no longer just a girl in her parents' house. I was a provider. The friendships I made there lasted years. Women with stories like mine, dreams deferred, lives built on resilience. We laughed during breaks, sharing sandwiches, whispering about men, passing around photographs of children. They taught me that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it hums quietly over a sewing machine, steady and unbroken. Love returned to me, not in a burst of fireworks, but in the steady flame of a man who saw me for who I was. I met Charles through a church picnic. He wasn't flashy or loud. He was steady, gentle, with a patience that balanced out my restless spirit. We married young by today's standards, but back then it was just what you did. Together we built a life, not grand, not perfect, but ours. Motherhood was the hardest and most beautiful thing I ever knew. The first time I held my child, I felt both fear and joy so big I thought it might break me. Nights were long, money was scarce, and we often argued over bills, but love pulled us through. Real love, the kind that doesn't always sparkle but endures. Our home was small, but it was filled with noise. Children running through halls, laughter, arguments, the smell of bread baking in the oven. We didn't have much, but we had enough. And in the quiet moments, Charles holding my hand on the porch after the children were asleep, watching the stars, I realized that enough was everything I'd ever wanted. Now, as an old woman, I look back and smile, not because it was perfect, but because it was mine. Life gave me heartache, it gave me losses, it gave me nights of doubt and mornings of exhaustion. But it also gave me joy. It gave me laughter so deep I cried. It gave me the warmth of a child's hug, the strength of a husband's hand, the beauty of friendships that lasted a lifetime. I may not have seen the world. I may not have chased grand adventures, but I lived. I loved. I built something that mattered, and that to me is enough. To anyone listening now, I say this: your life does not need to be extraordinary to be meaningful. Sometimes the greatest legacy you can leave is not in the world at large, but in the small worlds you build, your family, your friendships, your love. And when you're old, sitting in a chair with gray in your hair, you will see it was always the small moments that were the big ones. It's easy to smile when life is kind, but what truly shows who you are the days when the smile doesn't come so easy. Life was not always gentle with me. After Charles and I built our little home, there came years that stretched us thin. There were bills we struggled to pay, sickness that visited more than once, and losses that carved deep lines in my heart. I still remember the winter when my youngest fell ill. We didn't have much money for doctors, and the medicine was expensive. I sat by his bed night after night, watching his chest rise and fall, whispering prayers into the silence. My hands shook every time he coughed, and I swore I'd give up everything, every dream, every comfort, if only he would be spared. He recovered, thank the Lord, but I came away from that winter knowing how fragile everything truly is. There was also the year my father passed. I was older then, with children of my own, but in that moment I felt like a little girl again, lost without his steady presence. I had to hold my mother as she wept, had to be strong for her when inside I was breaking. And yet, even in the hardest times, I found strength I never knew I had. Strength in Charles' steady hand, in my children's laughter, in the quiet moments of faith when I knelt and begged for guidance. Life tested me over and over again, and though I bent, I did not break. When I was a girl, the world was simple, but I lived long enough to see it transform faster than I could have ever imagined. I was born in an age of black and white televisions, of radios crackling with news, of letters written by hand. By the time I was a young mother, the world was already shifting. Televisions in every home, cars becoming faster, cities growing taller. I remember the first time I saw a man walk on the moon. We sat crowded around a neighbor's TV, holding our breath, hardly believing our eyes. If we can do that, I thought, then anything is possible. And then came the computers, the cell phones, the internet, words that would have sounded like nonsense to me as a child. My grandchildren laugh when I tell them I grew up without screens, without instant answers, without a world at my fingertips. But I don't see my childhood as empty. If anything, it was full of people, of voices, of long conversations under the stars. I've lived through wars on the news, leaders rising and falling, movements that changed the course of history. I saw women gain rights my mother never dreamed of. I saw neighbors argue over politics, and I saw communities come together in tragedy. The world changed, yes, but through it all, some things stayed the same. The need for kindness, the hunger for love, the way a baby's laugh can melt away every worry. Progress may have carried us far, but it never replaced the simple truths that anchor us. Now, as an old woman with gray in her hair and stories in her heart, I know one thing for certain. Life is not about how much you have, but about how deeply you live. These days I rise early. I sit with my coffee and watch the sun spill over the horizon, painting the sky with colors that remind me of childhood summers. My bones ache, my steps are slower, but my heart is full in ways it never was when I was young. Sometimes my grandchildren ask me, "Grandma, do you regret anything?" I smile because of course I do. I regret harsh words spoken in anger. I regret the times I was too proud to say sorry. I regret not savoring certain moments while I had them. But regrets are not what define a life. What defines it are the moments of love, the courage to keep going, and the laughter that outlasts the tears. I want the young to know this. Don't wait for perfect. Don't wait until you're richer or wiser or older. Love now. Live now. Hold hands a little longer. Say the kind word before it's too late, because one day you'll be sitting in a chair like me, and you'll realize it was never the big plans that mattered most. It was the small, ordinary moments. A smile across the table, a walk in the rain, a song sung out of tune that built the story of your life. So I tell my story not because it's extraordinary, but because it is real. And if it touches even one heart, then all those years, all those lessons will live on in someone else. And that, I believe, is the closest any of us come to eternity. They say friends are the family you choose. Looking back, I see that without my friends, I might not have made it through some of life's hardest seasons. When I was a girl, friendships felt simple, passing notes in class, whispering secrets at sleepovers, daring each other to sneak out past curfew. But as I grew older, I realized that true friends are not just companions for fun. They are the anchors in the storms. I remember Helen, my neighbor from across the street when I was a young wife. We both had babies at the same time, and more than once we found ourselves rocking, crying children together on her porch at midnight, whispering about how exhausted we were, but laughing too, because there was comfort in knowing we weren't alone. Later in life, when I lost my mother, it was my friends who filled my kitchen with casseroles, who sat with me in silence when words weren't enough, who reminded me that grief shared is grief halved. Friendship carried me through the years. It was in the phone calls that stretched for hours, in the letters exchanged when distance separated us, in the cups of coffee shared at kitchen tables worn from use. Even now, as an old woman, I treasure those bonds. Many of my dearest friends have already passed, but their voices echo in my memory. If there's one thing I want the young to remember, it's this. Treasure your friendships. Nurture them. Don't let the busyness of life steal them away, because one day when you're old and gray, you won't remember the chores or the errands. You'll remember the laughter of a friend who knew you better than anyone else. Jed with flower. It's in the stories I tell on nights when the power goes out and the only light is the glow of a candle. I want my grandchildren to know where they come from, to know that their grandmother lived in a world without cell phones, without computers, when you had to look someone in the eye and really talk. I want them to know that hard work is honorable, that kindness is not weakness, and that forgiveness is a kind of strength. Sometimes I wonder what they'll remember of me. Maybe it will be the smell of my apple pie, or the sound of my laugh, or the way I always said, be grateful, even for the little things. And maybe that is enough. Because the truth is, none of us live forever. But if I can leave behind a family that loves, a few traditions that last, and a handful of stories that make someone smile, then I will have lived a good life.